All right, welcome back, chat. We're back. Thanks for being so patient. Appreciate y'all so much. So, today I'm joined by a very special guest. I'm joined by Graham Berger, the senior game designer for Evoker. And Graham, I understand you worked on the new class Evoker coming to World of Warcraft. Can you maybe tell us a little bit more about yourself? Just do a quick introduction if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure thing. Hey everyone. Yeah, as Preheat said, Graham Berger. I've been on WoW for um uh 7 or 8 years now. Started back in Legion. And yeah, it's been an awesome experience working on the Dracthyr Evoker. There's a whole team behind this race and this class and the starting zone. It's not just me, but it's been a real privilege to work on it, and it's been awesome kind of going through alpha and beta and seeing all the feedback, and iterating on Evoker with all of you.
Yeah, and I mean, it kind of shows because honestly, the class feels really, really solid. Obviously, in like pre-patch, we don't have all the tools yet. Like we're still feeling a little watered down, but I think people at least get like the feeling for it. It's kind of like training wheels. So yeah, just some quick introduction. So for those of you who are unaware, obviously World of Warcraft has a new expansion coming out on November 28th, and of course you can get your drops for your mounts and all that good stuff if you start tuning in. Then I believe the Feldrake is coming out on the 28th there. So just a quick introduction on that. The new Dragonflight of Azeroth have returned, calling upon us to defend our the ancestral home, the Dragon Isles. So we'll be going in there, playing with our dragons, doing new dungeons, new raids, all that good stuff. It's going to be super duper exciting. As far as who I am, a little background on me. My name is Preheat. I've raided at a world first level for many years. Now I raid EU with Mist a little bit more casually. I've also been an MDI participant in the past. And I'm someone who's planning to main Evoker in the next patch, and I'm also writing the guides for Wowhead and producing content for it there as well. So let's get on to the questions. If you don't mind, I'd love to ask you some questions about Evoker.
Yeah, that'd be great. Let's do it.
Okay. Yeah, obviously, there's like working for Blizzard and like getting to like design classes seems like a really, really cool job. So there was a question I saw in like an interview that was in like the launch trailer that was kind of similar, but I'm going to have my own twist on it. So going all the way back to classic WoW, classes are often defined by their most overpowered abilities. So like you think of Paladin, you think of like bubble hurting, right? You think of Mage, you think of blinking and polymorphing, stuff like that. So what is the ability for Evoker that you feel kind of defines the class, or which is your favorite ability that you had whenever you were designing it?
Not what is the most overpowered ability. Got it.
Yeah. I mean, it could be either or.
It's honestly a tough question. I really like how a lot of the abilities have turned out. Personally, Pyre and Disintegrate for me are just embody kind of what we wanted from the beginning of releasing powerful magic from your mouth. But I think as the development has gone on and seeing how Evoker's played out, like Hover, I think is the cornerstone of the class, right? Dashing in any direction and being able to cast while moving so much. And that spell kind of being a big skill differentiator too, right? Mastering when and how to use Hover, I think, is such a big part of playing Evoker well. That's got to be it for me.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like, I know for me, like, whenever I'm in cooldowns, if I know I need to move ahead of time, I'm going to, like, pre-hover just so I can chain Disintegrates while I'm running around. So, yeah, no, I think, like, Pyre feels really great. Disintegrate, also fantastic. That kind of actually leads into our next question. So, obviously, it's been really exciting to actually play Evoker. I'm sure a lot of players out there who were watching beta and maybe weren't in the beta were, super stoked for the pre-patch to be able to get their hands on it. So, people are probably kind of familiar with the mastery now, right? Like Giant Killer, where you do more damage, the more health the targets have. So for stuff like Evoker Mastery and like stuff like Eternity Surge or like Scintillation, right? Things where it's like Evoker has 2-target cleave or like some sort of really powerful niche that it has. Are these things that you kind of plan ahead of time whenever you're developing the class? Or are they just things that kind of happen and then you just kind of, maybe take it from there?
Both, honestly. For Devastation, we had early on kind of what's cool about dragons, like what's going to be awesome about being a dragon and feeling like a dragon. What do we need to deliver on? The sort of obvious one is like big AoE, right? You're breathing fire across the battlefield. You want to feel like you're really good at especially clumped AoE and doing a ton of damage to targets. For the 2-target cleave, especially with Scintillation and Eternity's Span, that sort of naturally fell out of making talents and abilities that were about just big AoE, right? Oh, wouldn't it be cool if Eternity Surge could hit more targets, because that leans further into that strength. Oh, suddenly with Scintillation, okay, they're good at 2-target. That's neat. That still fits, right? So two target wasn't a plan, but AoE was. Giant Killer was very kind of again fantasy first. That's going to be a recurring theme here. Of Neltharion made these super soldiers to be his personal army, be the protectors of Azeroth, whatever his plans might have been. And so, what did they need to be good at fighting? Other
Giants.
dragons, right? Giants, dragons, big creatures, things that were
Mhm.
of danger to Azeroth. And also, two pieces. Dragons, in our stories, in media, they don't kind of wait around for things to die when they're in combat, right? They strike decisively. They just blow up the whole battlefield. Now, I can't give you an insta-gib ability, right? That's be a little too good. But
Right.
how do we get that feeling across in a mastery? Giant Killer was kind of that. That first strike is going to be your most powerful, and just end it before the fight even starts.
Yeah, I'll say like whenever you're like leveling, that mastery just feels so amazing. Like you
A
just
full charge fire breath.
yeah, full charge fire breath or like a full charge eternity surge like on a pack of mobs. It feels really, really great. Cool. Well, that's interesting. So I guess a lot of it just kind of happens, but all right. Well, I think y'all did a pretty good job because it feels really good, especially like having the ability to target swap and stuff on raid bosses, just being able to do like a lot of burst to a new target. That's pretty great. So on that same note, so, obviously throughout the beta process, we saw a lot of iterations of Evoker. There's a lot of changes that happened. Basically, the class got like one big rework and then like a small change that actually was a pretty big change, right, with Eye of Infinity, which I think is a great change, honestly. So we had our defensives buffed quite a bit too. So I think like pretty much all of the pain points, right? Like defensives being an issue, Pyre not being something you want to cast because the opportunity cost was too high with Eye of Infinity and the damage being low. These are all issues that have, I feel like we've resolved them. To me, the biggest issue, it kind of leads into Mastery. It feels like aggro might be like an issue right now, right? Like if you're doing Mythic Plus and like even if you wait for the tank to like establish threat, you're so good at dealing damage at the start of the pull, it almost feels like you're almost like a tank spec, right? Like obviously Evoker doesn't have a tank spec, but are there any plans to look into how aggro is for Evoker and maybe kind of work something in there?
Totally, yeah. So we went in and checked just to make sure there weren't any bugs. So their threat generation, I can confirm, is like as intended.
Okay.
There's nothing secret going on there. But no, I think you just need to wait longer before you pop off. Be careful with your tip of the scales.
Oh man, you're breaking my heart with this. Okay.
Now it's something we're talking about, and you're going to continue to keep an eye on. So nothing to announce right now, but if it continues being a problem, it's something we'll definitely try to address for sure.
Okay. Well, at least y'all are looking into it. I'm glad to know that there isn't any secret behind the scenes stuff because I feel like for me, I just get aggro like all the time. And I'm like, man, at this point, I just ask my tank. Like, I'm like, hey, do I have permission to burst? And then I still get aggro, but at least then it's not my fault, right? I can blame the tank.
Yeah.
Anyways, okay. So I have to ask this question. I know that there's already an answer to it, but I have to ask it or else the chat would absolutely riot. So we have Preservation now at 30 yards, right? We have Devastation, it's still at 25 yards. For folks who are new to Evoker, it's going to be a little weird getting used to it. But I personally think after 300 hours playing Evoker, I feel like the ranged is something that you can kind of get used to. But are there any plans in the future to maybe adjust it later down the road?
No. Next question.
Okay. All right.
Let's talk about it. I think it's an important question. Mid-range, this new mid-range style is certainly new for the game. I think that's kind of part of what's appealing about it is that it is a very distinct playstyle. Whenever we're adding a new class to World of Warcraft, it's how do we make this feel fresh, feel new, but still feel WoW? And so exploring this new range increment is part of that. I mean, you've seen Evoker plays really differently from our other caster classes and differently from a lot of melee. Our intention has always been have that mid-range, but give you the tools to make up for it, give you, hover and verdant embrace and deep breath to get in and out and reposition as you need to. I think that's working out pretty well. If, it ends up being an issue more than kind of anticipated, I think we'd look to improve those tools further. But the mid-range also, again, kind of came out of a fantasy push first of a dragon. They aren't sitting 100 yards back hurling spells. They're getting into the thick of it.
Yeah.
And while we wanted to, have them be a caster, we have those cool 5 schools of magic from the Dragonflights. We want to have you casting spells. Being physically closer to the enemies does a lot to kind of give you that sense of I'm in the middle of the battlefield. I'm really up in it. going toe to toe with my enemies.
Cool. Okay, so a follow up to that. So, as someone who's been in the past like part of comp discussions at like a world first level in raiding, it's always important to kind of scrutinize like every single pick in the raid, right? Like you're looking at each class and you're saying, okay, what is the pros and cons of this guy being in the raid versus something else we can bring in, and it's it's really down to the wire. Obviously, for most folks, it's not going to be that intense. You're not going to be looking at it with this much scrutiny, but when it comes to like evokers, obviously we have a very prominent downside with the short and ranged. Is there maybe what are the intended strengths of I'll start with preservation first. What are the intended strengths of preservation evoker?
Sure, yeah. So evoker, and going to be similar for devastation, but burst AoE healing, particularly with clumped allies, right? Dream Breath, Emerald Blossom really speak to that. Obviously, we want mobility to be a strength, being able to navigate the play space, do kind of the jobs that the raid needs them to do to reposition, but also kind of that preparation aspect. The bronze magic being able to prepare a bunch of echoes ahead of time because something bad is coming. Your knowledge of the fight really leaning into that is going to be a skill differentiator as well.
Cool. And so yeah, I mean, I've played Reservation just a little bit, but I absolutely love how much damage you can put out it, and I love how you can, like you said, you can just kind of queue up abilities, kind of store them, and then just blow them all out whenever you need to. So that's really fun. Okay, so what about Devastation?
Similar, clumped AoE, right? Again, back on that fantasy of if I'm going to fire breath everything, what else can I do to just annihilate groups of enemies? As well as the high mobility, like the 25-yard range being a restriction compared to other casters. Certainly, compared to a melee, you have far more range than any melee class, right? And especially during AoE, the vast majority of your abilities are instant cast, barring the empower spells. So I think there are going to be moments where that range is an advantage compared to some of the other classes that have to deal with similar mechanics.
Cool. All right, yeah. So next question. So we recently had a change to Fire Breath. I guess it wasn't like it wasn't that recent, but a while back. Sure. Whenever we were like pushing more dot damage into the upfront damage. So when it comes to like empowered spells for Devastation and Preservation, with the current state of things, are we feeling like they hit the mark, like the current state of empowered spells, or do you still feel like maybe there's a little work to be done, possibly with some of the bugs where it may cancel if you're like spamming it, or other things where the bar just like, I don't know, obviously there's like bugs with it, right? But I assume most of those will be fixed.
Yeah, so as you said, on the bug front, like we're trying to address those as quickly as we can. Some of them are trickier than others, but ongoing process. We want to make sure that Empower kind of feels and plays smoothly for everybody. In terms of kind of sort of gameplay and mechanics, I think we're happy with where they're at. I'd be curious kind of what your experience has been. Do you find uses for them?
Oh, I love it. There's so much nuance to it. Oh my God, it's crazy. Like so like Fire Breath alone, right? Just Fire Breath. Obviously, doing it at rank 1, if you have the full effects of mastery because you're in your cooldowns, right? Especially like in single target, it's great for that. I love the fact that the upfront damage is square root scaling, but the dot is uncapped. So like it basically creates like this curve where it's like, okay, at 1 target, rank 1, at 2 targets, maybe you do the 2, and then 3 seems to have a little bit more of a window, and then there's definitely like a small sliver where like you want to do rank 4 if you have access to it with the talent, right? And then it kind of comes back afterwards, right? Like after, because the square root scaling is coming back. So I feel like there's just so much nuance, and that's just like one spell, right? Like how many classes have this much nuance with just like a single ability?
No, I'm so glad. Like that, the earlier version of Fire Breath where the dot just lasted longer as you charged up, that was really us exploring this entirely new mechanic in the charge up. I think there were kind of 2 schools of thought. You have Eternity Surge on one side, which we got a ton of feedback, alpha and beta, saying Eternity Surge is an awesome empower spell. Like I use every rank of it depending on the situation. I really feel like I'm making a smart choice as I'm playing. And Fire Breath fell on the other side of the fence of I charge it to full, like that's not cool. And we wanted to try that because there's an efficiency game with that old version of Fire Breath, right? You're spending less time casting for a shorter dot. If you're thinking about, how long mobs are going to live, there's some gameplay there. But the feedback we got was really, I don't like that I'm getting a consolation prize. I just feel like I did it wrong if I don't get to max rank every time. And so going to the version we have now, really well received, and I think that's kind of our framing for empower spells moving forward. Not that we're about to add a bunch, but if we were to use that mechanic more, future additions to Evoker or in future expansions, making sure that you don't just care about rank 3, you care about rank 1 and 2 and 3 in different situations is really important for that mechanic to shine.
Well, I have to say, I feel like y'all really hit the mark with it, because
Awesome.
Fire Breath feels so good now. It is fantastic. And then obviously Eternity Surge has been great pretty much this whole time, right? So really, no, I can't say much bad about that one. That one's great. Cool. So the next question coming up here is from Mitt, who is a preservation guide writer for Icy Veins. He's also a raider in Liquid Guild. So his question is, Echo is by far the most unique and interesting ability in the preservation kit, but it often gets overshadowed by the power of Emerald Blossom since they share a resource. Which niche do you see each of them excelling in when you're tuning the two abilities?
Yeah, so really good question. In terms of kind of play style, Echo is very much intended to sort of amplify your healing more at low target counts. You can spread it out a lot, but that takes a ton of pre-planning, right? That is supposed to be sort of your lower target count. I lean on this ability. In a raid, using it to spread and prepare, I think is a strength there. But then at this kind of mid to high target counts, leaning more on Emerald Blossom, if you take, Fluttering Seedlings and kind of using that to extend the range of your healing and that sort of thing. But our hope is, as tuning gets dialed in along the way, that really, depending on the situation, you are using a mixture of both. I know there are builds that kind of lean really heavily one way or lean really heavily the other, but I think the ideal is that you find situations where both are powerful and you mix both into your kit.
Cool. All right, good answer. So our next question comes from Volk, who is our preservation guide writer for Wowhead. Volk asks, in encounters, mechanics are typically coded to either hit any random non-tank player, range player, or melee player. Right now, we're under the impression that Evoker's flagged as range. I think that we all agree that that's true. So does Evoker sit in a new category between these two when it comes to certain boss mechanics that might be extra restrictive due to the decreased range? So yeah, is there any consideration for excluding Evoker from mechanics that you need to bait max range?
Sure. So yes, right now Evoker is treated as a ranged or as a healer as preservation. As far as I'm aware at the moment, there are no mechanics in Vault of the Incarnates that kind of treat Evokers differently. What we've seen from both beta testing and our internal testing is that they really do have the tools to handle the mechanics in those encounters. I think we're getting kind of a false positive on Shadowlands raids where designers didn't have to consider Evoker at all, right? You see something like Sludge Fist and kind of the strategies that evolved for that. Sure, those don't work great for an Evoker, but we don't have Sludge Fist in Vault of the Incarnates.
Right.
So looking forward, considering that, yes, mid-range exists, we need to make sure that they have the tools to deal with our mechanics. I think that's looking good for Vault and is something obviously we're going to keep in mind moving forward.
Yeah, I'll say, whenever I did raid testing, and I just played Devastation, I didn't play healer at all, but I noticed, and this might just be a bonus question, but it felt like y'all almost designed the raid encounters around Evoker, because it felt like I was way too good at too many of the things. Like, there were just like little things where it'd be like, oh, these ads spawn every 30 seconds. Okay, cool. That's literally the cooldown on, Eternity Surge. So it's perfect, right? Or like, oh, big ad pack every minute. Okay, perfect. Onyx Legacy, we got Deep Breath every minute. So yeah, I mean, it really feels like a lot of the things in the raid work really well for that. I'm curious though, like in the future though, because obviously Vaulted Incarnates right now, everything looks great. I don't think there's any real issues with the range when it comes to boss mechanics specifically. The only thing that's maybe a little bit weird is Grim Totem, but you can just like move out of range whenever the fire's dropping, so you just play around it. But like in future raid tiers, like obviously this is something that y'all will keep having to consider, right?
Definitely. And talking to the encounter team about Vault, their impression is that they didn't really have to do a ton of extra work for Evoker. It is fitting in naturally with kind of the fights that they want to design and the things they're building. So yes, well, it'll be a consideration, but so far it doesn't seem like it's having sort of a negative impact on the way they design raid encounters.
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to like how the strat is as well, right? Like how you formulate a strat. So there is a little bit of friction there because I know like typically raid leaders will want to be like, all right, all range stack on that guy, all melee stack on this guy. And then it's like, oh, Evoker, you just do your own thing. Just figure it out, man. Just, just try not to die.
But
so yeah,
that goes back to their tools, right? Like
right.
Your mastery of using hover, if you know that you need to be stacked at this moment, you're going to dash out for the stack moment and then deep breath back in and deal a bunch of damage. So again, hoping those tools kind of help smooth over those moments where the strat might not quite line up with Evoker range.
Right.
But yeah.
Okay, cool. All right. So yeah, thanks for letting me expand on that question just a little bit.
Absolutely.
So the next question comes from the community. So I had a poll I put out with a forum, and it was like about a month ago where people could ask their questions. And this is one that we had here. So I don't remember who said this. I think they were all anonymous answers, but someone in the community asked, with abilities like Rescue, Oppressing Roar, Source of Magic, Time Spiral, Zephyr, Cauterizing Flame in the class tree, are Evokers intended to be more of a supportive class as a damage dealer, or is it just kind of something in between?
Sure. Yes and no. I will say, as filling a damage dealer role, we want them to, deal competitive damage compared to all of their allies, right? You should be bringing as much damage as a rogue or as a hunter to your raid. We aren't doing the hybrid tax of your, right? But in terms of their kind of supportive capabilities, yeah, kind of like you have your both damage and healer specializations. We want you to have that hybrid field, be able to contribute in those fields. As you said, preservation, dealing a fair bit of damage. But a lot of that comes back to, we have these 5 flights of magic. We made the core spec abilities to be just for 2, but wanted to make sure that your utility kit and your hybrid kit touched on all 5. That your defensive is black magic, that deep breath is black magic isn't an accident, right?
Mm-hmm.
That Zephyr feels kind of physical and from the dragon's racial capabilities. That Time Spiral is bronze but accessible to both specializations. Very much we wanted to give you new utility, new ways of interacting with mechanics and kind of axes of utility that other classes have touched in the past, and lean into the theme that I think is sort of unique to WoW dragons and lore, that they are, dragonflights are very kind of community driven. They're very familial, right? All the red dragons have shared ideals and sort of a shared vision of how the world should be. So giving Evoker a lot of group support and group utility capabilities was a nod to that, to say, yeah, you don't care about just yourself. You're here for the betterment of the group.
Yeah, I'll say Rescue, obviously one of the coolest abilities that's ever been in the game. I love it so much. I mean, the trolling capacity you can have with this if you want to turn against your fellow party members is crazy.
Silencer works on it, but I do enjoy all the videos on Twitter, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, you can also use it for good. And like the way that you can do that, it's incredible. I also like that you can still cast, like while you're being rescued, you can still cast. So, moving a priest that's ramping, or like heaven forbid if you're, moving a warlock. I mean, come on. But it seems like it might be worth it in some cases, right? So really fun. So basically what I'm getting from this is it sounds like the hybrid tax concept is like completely gone. Like we're done with that idea.
Yeah, it's, not something the team really has tuned around for a long time. Players really identify nowadays with a specialization in a lot of cases, right? You aren't showing up to a raid. In Classic, you'd be like, I'm a paladin, and I can be a lot of different types of paladin. But nowadays you show up and I'm a ret paladin. I am a holy paladin. And that's the way a lot of players kind of view their character and view themselves. And so it's important to us that you can be successful in your desired role and not feel like you're kind of being tamped down for unknown reasons. And balancing kind of the additional hybrid capabilities you bring against things that other classes bring, right? A rogue isn't bringing off healing, but they can deal with mechanics. They can, save themselves. They can get around really quickly, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So it is a balancing act, but yeah, no hybrid tax as such.
Cool. Yeah, no, they're pretty great. I mean, Cauterizing Flame in some dungeons is just amazing.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Okay, so the last question. This is probably the most requested question I had across the board. So we had kind of a similar one asked in the Wowhead interview, but this one's a little different. So are there any plans to add more transmog options or modifiers to the combat evoker form in the future? And a follow-up to that, things such as like different body forms, or maybe like a different dragon spawn, different dragonoid, other visage forms that maybe aren't the same race like humans, right? Like elves, tauren, gnomes, stuff like this in the future.
Mm-hmm. So good question. As far as customizations for the combat form, really for both forms, I mean, the Dracthyr is the most customizable race by far that we've ever added to WoW. Seeing all the just pictures people are posting of like, look at the Dracthyr and Visage I made and how they match up. I've seen some really impressive ones where the transmog they pick on their Visage form matches the customized armor they have on their Dracthyr, and I'm very jealous because I was not clever enough to do that. I'm like, okay, I gotta go get on my yak and play with transmog. But no plans at the moment to kind of add a ton more customization to Dracthyr. Obviously, across the board, we love adding customization to races. It lets players express themselves. It just gives you a new toy to play with. So it's something the team is interested in adding to the game, across the board in the future, kind of when it makes sense, as time permits, that sort of thing. But no, we're honestly really happy kind of with how Dracthyr looks, where it's at, that we've added this new silhouette to kind of the family of dragons, and that they are distinct. They do stand out. We think that's really cool about Dracthyr.
I love that you can choose to turn off the visage form, because I just love being a goofy little dragon all the time. And it's the only thing you can play in World of Warcraft, and you don't have to wear pants. And as we all know, pants are lame. So, being a dragon without pants. Yeah, I love Donald Duck in it. It's great. Okay, well, it has been such a pleasure interviewing you, Graham. Thank you so much for this. I appreciate the answers. I really hope that y'all look into the aggro stuff more in the future. I was a little disappointed by that, but I gotta say, everything else 10 to 10, and keep up the great work. Y'all are doing fantastic with Evoker.
Awesome. This was a lot of fun. Thank you so much, and likewise.
All right, bye.
Take care.
Okay, we're back. All right, I gotta get my computer all set up again. Hold on, let me send a quick message just thanking them for the opportunity. Thanks again. This was really great. So chat, I'm curious, like, how do y'all feel about the answers? We can watch the interview and kind of like talk about this. Good answers, good questions. Yes. Jared says, well done. I do think the aggro is big over the top for evokers. Yeah, that's really the thing I kind of feel still, but he was pretty thorough with the responses. Yeah, I appreciated it. Yeah, I feel like he was very candid and thorough with that.